So we are live now.
Yes.
Good evening. You can start.
Yeah, I'm live now.
Yeah, we are live.
Good evening, friends. I, on behalf of IIA Audit Club and Calcutta Chapter of the Institute of Internal Auditors, welcome you all to today's virtual conference meet on standards, framework, and guidance on internal audit. The next 2 hours of learning will be very useful for all of us for our day-to-day practice. Today we have with us President of Calcutta Chapter, newly appointed, or you can say elected President of Calcutta Chapter, Sri Arijit Roy. We have with us Guwahati Audit Club President, Sri Naveen Garg, and our today's conference esteemed speaker, Sri Chadha ji. Now going with the agenda of the today's program, I request Guwahati Audit Club President, Sri Naveen Garg, to kindly give his welcome address. Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Vikas. Good evening to one you all. It has been a long period with no activities at Guwahati Audit Club. Extremely sorry for that. We are still fighting with COVID and don't know how long it will continue. But this year, we will try to organize as many programs as possible. And also, we promise our Calcutta Chapter President that we will add more members to the club and ensure no one leaves. A big congratulations and warm welcome to newly elected President of IIA Calcutta Chapter, Sri Arijit Roy. Hopefully, under his presidency, our chapter will reach greater heights. Today, we have one of the best speakers on audit with us, Sri Sumant Chadha. I, on behalf of IIA Calcutta Chapter and Guwahati Audit Club, welcome him at this VCM. I am confident that the session with Sri Chadha will be a fruitful one. Warm welcome to all the office bearer and BOG members of IIA Calcutta Chapter and Guwahati Audit Club. Welcome to all fellow members and professional friends. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Naveen, for the brief welcome address. Now I request Mr. Vikas Jain to kindly introduce to the esteemed gathering our newly appointed, very energetic Mr. Arijit Roy. Over to you, Vikas Jain.
Good evening. Thank you, Vikas. This is really an opportunity and my pleasure to introduce before you all the leader of our chapter, our president, Sri Arijit Roy, who took charge 2 days back. Arijit Roy is a graduate in commerce with honors from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. He's also a member of the Institute of Internal Auditor and currently serving as the president of Institute of Internal Auditors, Calcutta Chapter for the year 21-22. Having over 29 years of professional experience spreading across the areas of internal audit, process and technology controls, risk advisory, automation, as well as commercials and financial controller function. He is a certified information security management system auditors having successfully qualified in the lead auditor training course. He is presently managing the business advisory service line for Aligned Group India Talent Advisory, assisting the US organizations in launching a professional service talent center and an innovation hub in India. He has worked on several industry verticals in consumer products, retail, information technology, consulting, engineering, glass, automotive, power, metal and mining, infrastructure, real estate project, healthcare, hospitality, media, financial service, non-profit organizations. I think list is very long. In the diverse geographics covering India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Singapore, UAE, Australia, and Vietnam. Still, list will be adding and adding. He had worked for major accounting, finance, and consulting firms such as Deloitte, EY, PwC, Productivity. He had also worked with leading companies like Tata, Reckitt, and Every India. In his last role as a senior director for TCG Digital Solution, he used to manage competency related to robotic process automations and audit automation. More to his charismatic, he's a prolific speaker on internal audit, risk management, risk intelligence, automations, economy, management principle at seminars and conferences held by ICAI, IIA, Information System Audit and Control Associations, and many other similar organizations. He's also a member of Calcutta Club and Lake Club, Kolkata. Please welcome with a big round of applause to our president, CA Arijit Roy. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Vikash. It's a great opportunity and a great honor, I would say. Good evening, professional friends. Please allow me to express my immense pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual conference hosted by Guwahati Audit Club of the Institute of Internal Auditors, Calcutta Chapter. As you have already heard, the topic for this conference today is standards, frameworks, and guidance on internal audit. And we are honored to have an eminent professional like Mr. Sumant Chadha, past president of IIA India, as well as that of Delhi chapter, to deliberate on the subject. Mr. Chadha is also the senior partner of Messrs. T.R. Chadha, an acclaimed professional firm of India. And I have specially requested Mr. Chadha to share some of his rich professional experiences with us today. I am pleased to notice that, albeit this being a Friday, we are having around 250 registrations for participation today across our country and even beyond. Apart from the host city, Guwahati, we are quite a number of registrations we see from Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Kolkata, and even from Dubai. Participation from large number of banking organizations like HSBC, Bank of America, RBL Bank, Karnataka Bank, Doha Bank, Ahili United Bank, etc., as well as renowned organizations like Reliance, MRF, Tata Capital, PwC, UI, Genpact, Ashok Leyland, GAIL, Arohan, Magma, Muthat, Flipkart, Ocwen, HNG, etc., makes us absolutely delighted. IIA India Calcutta Chapter is grateful for your kind participation and support towards our program. My congratulations to Mr. Navin Garg, Mr. Vikas Jain, Mr. Vikash Agarwal, and all members of Guwahati Audit Club, as well as our BOG members for Calcutta Chapter, for hosting this virtual conference on this very pertinent topic. Some of my professional colleagues may be aware of that Guwahati is the place where I was born and is a very special, has a very special place for me. Now, just to set the context, let us take a moment to review the official definition of internal audit from the Institute of Internal Auditors. Internal auditing is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance process, I don't feel anything can better explain and define internal audit. The definition emphasizes the deep value that stakeholders expect from internal audit and to what level this function impacts an organization's entire operation. Today, internal audit aim to deliver a wide range of fully integrated high quality assurance and consulting services to organizations and their stakeholders. The edifice of internal audit service delivery model is the International Professional Practices Framework, or IPPF, which is the conceptual framework that organizes authoritative guidance promulgated by the IIA. This framework is intended to assist internal auditors fulfill their mission for enhancing and protecting organizational value through risk-based objective assurance, advice, and insight. Thanks to all once again and look forward for an enlightening session today. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, our Honorable President, Mr. Ajit Roy, for an insight to our Calcutta chapter, the role of internal auditors and how audit could help and how we professionals could take up these assignments. Now, I request once again Mr. Vikas Jain to kindly introduce our eminent speaker today, Mr. Sumant Chadha.
Thank you once again, Vikash, for giving me this opportunity to introduce before you the speaker of the session, Sumant Chadha from Delhi. Mr. Sumant Chadha is an alumnus of iconic Sri Ram College of Commerce and an awardee of Ronak Education Gold Medal for securing first rank in CA in North India and second rank in All India. He is also a law graduate. He is working as a senior partner with firm Mr. T.R. Chadha and Company LLP since July 1984 and heading the risk and advisory practice of the firm with a workforce of around 300 employees in his vertical. He is a past president of the Institute of Internal Auditors India, which is affiliated to IIA Inc. USA and also its Delhi chapter. He was a special invitee to the National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standard for implementing Ind AS in India and to the Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI. He is an active member of the Committee for Member in Practice, CMP of ICAI. He has been on the Managing Committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce and also served on many boards as an independent director. He is a speaker at various seminars organized under the aegis of different professional bodies. He is co-author of 2 books on corporate laws. It's my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Mr. Sumant Chadha. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vikas ji, for the kind words. And Minas, can you give me the right to share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mr. C. Arijit and C. Naveen, and congratulations for the seminar for the new year for IIA Calcutta Chapter, as well as under the aegis of the Guwahati Audit Club. My association with Calcutta, when I qualified way back in the 84, I used to come there very often, and I'll just go to my presentation first straight away, and then we can take this forward. Yeah, so I'll just and the audit of Steel Authority, Hindustan Copper, and various other institutions in Calcutta. So I used to make very frequent trips for several years. And I just got married, so my wife got suspicious. Why is every week he has to fly to Calcutta? So much so that after that I didn't get the opportunity to come to Calcutta for many years. And when I finally came, and in fact, thanks to IIA and Calcutta Chapter and their lovely programs, I have been visiting over the last few years also, as and when the opportunity arises. Internal audit is a very interesting, subject for me, and I have been personally um, evolving in this profession because I feel more than a science, it is more of an art. And of course, the scientific part, the technical part is the IPPF and the standards, etc., which are very critical, mandatory, as well as essential. And as my colleague G mentioned, it's the integral part of the whole internal audit ecosystem. But and that is what I'm going to talk about today. But more than that, how to actually be on the field, and the training when you get in the army or in any profession, and once you're on the field, is totally different. The whole mind and body and your training comes to fore. It gives you the entire background of how to proceed, but the reflex action of how to manage a situation will be also so relevant, and the blend of two can make wonderful internal audit exercise. So my program today, about an hour and a half on the IPPF and the standards there against, along with the Q&A. I'll just take you through some of the key aspects. It's theoretical, but focused on very critical elements of how internal audit actually should be carried out. We, as internal audit professionals, may or may not be aware of these standards, but may be conducting internal audit for years. When I started my profession of internal audit decades back, there was no question of these standards. It's more of instinct and vouching and generating one report after the other. But as we evolved and got involved with IIA and also with ISB, we realized that there is some method to the madness of internal audit, and there are these standards about. So what are we talking about? The IIA sets the standard for the way internal audit is practiced around the world through these IPPF. This is actually a red book. It's an old red book I saw first time when I became involved in the Delhi chapter about 15 years ago, and then it has undergone a revision. It's a new avatar, and we have now a 2017 edition. It's a good book to have around, but now with everything virtual, it's very difficult to get hold of the red book. We have one in our Delhi chapter, and haven't seen that for a long time, actually. So the whole concept of internal audit and the IPPF is actually in various circles. And I just want to mention there was a major amendment in 2017, and three things were done. The mission was introduced, 10 core principles were introduced, and emphasis was given on practice advisories and implementation guides. The mission, of course, is the entire circle outside. We're going to talk about each of them briefly as we go along the presentation today. And the dark blue shaded portion is the mandatory guidance, and the lighter version of a grayer version is recommendatory guidance. So mandatory guidance covers four key parts: core principles, definition, the standards themselves, and code of ethics. And the recommended guidance includes two parts, that is implementation guidance and supplementary guidance. And how we understand this is something, once we go through each of them, we realize we are familiar with most of these. But one thing I wanted to make sure is that the profession is richly diverse. We are looking at internal audit across the world, across different organizations, industries, etc. And it is conducted in highly variable legal cultural environments within organizations that vary in purpose, size, complexity, and structure, and by persons within or outside the organization, co-sourced, in-source, outsourced, etc. But while differences may affect the professional practice of internal audit in each environment, the profession is guided by a common body of knowledge and a living reference that represents the collective knowledge and generally accepted procedures of successful internal audit practitioners. This IPPF is a conceptual framework which as far as the circle is concerned, that organizes authoritative guidance, and it encompasses mandatory and recommendatory recommendations. But why should I comply with the standards? The basic thing: I'm doing good internal audit, I know how to find areas, my reports have also been appreciated. But why should I comply with the standards? Just as for accounting standards provide statutory auditors with the requirements to comply with auditing rules, procedures, etc., these IIA standards provide internal auditors with the globally accepted tools and expectations for conducting internal audit. Compliance with the standards ensure that your internal audit, they are functioning effectively. The quality of the audit is consistent. And most important, the internal audit function is providing value to your organization. End result is providing value. We have to operate at the highest level. It is actually our Gita as well as the Bible, I ask me. I may be a good soul, I may be, but I need some reference point. And this is the reference point I am looking at. Because when standards are not followed, risks may not be identified, and therefore controls may not be in place and tested. This function provides assurance to my board of directors, my audit committee, and other stakeholders that risks are controlled, that has to be ensured, and the controls are operating as intended. Therefore, complying with the standards could lessen the risk of audit failure. That is very critical for me, and also to ensure that the audit resources are used efficiently. Overall, the standards provide the profession with credibility and, of course, global acceptance. That is important for me. They represent the minimum expected requirements that normally should be found in all internal audit functions. Yet, actually, in the universal survey by the CBOC, which is the common body of knowledge which carries out surveys for IIA periodically, revealed a significant level of non-compliance by the chief audit executives, though a significant progress has been made in the last few years. So the survey pointed out that all the standards are not being followed. Some portion is being followed by some and some by the others, but not as a whole. But that has changing over the years, and I see as we progress with more compliance and more awareness, things are only going to be improving. Arijit mentioned about the definition of internal audit, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Actually, the whole ecosystem of the standards are revolving around this. But the mission of internal audit, which was introduced in 2007, mission, like we understand, is the going to outer space these days. That's become the fashion. We have the biggest and the richest people doing that. I don't know when you and I will do that, but that's for another day. But basically, we have to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. This is the mission, and coupled with the definition of internal audit, we are set to take our mission forward, our flight forward, and go to the 4 mandatory areas of the standards. The first is the core principle. These core principles, taken as a whole, are internal audit effectiveness. And for internal audit to be effective, all principles should be present and operating effectively. Basically, there are 10 of these, and all are critical for me. In that, they have to be how an internal audit as well as internal audit activity demonstrates achievement of the core principles may be quite different from organization to organization. We must keep that into perspective. But failure to achieve any of the principles would imply that the internal audit activity was not as effective as it could be in achieving internal audit mission. So these core principles are very well known to us. Somewhere or the other we follow them partly or fully. Just to reiterate, they demonstrate integrity. My internal audit function has to demonstrate competence and due professional care, and it is objective and free from undue influence, basically independent. It aligns with my strategic objectives and risks of the organization, so I have to be totally in sync, and is appropriately positioned so that in the hierarchy of the management I have a reckoning, and I am adequately resourced. Going forward, I have to demonstrate quality and also work on continuous improvement. The key thing today and always has been communication, so I have to effectively communicate all that aspects of my internal audit to the top management and all the stakeholders, and also have to provide risk-based assurance coupled with insight proactive and focused approach. Ultimately, key thing for every activity audit should be that it should promote organizational improvement. Without that, it will be very difficult to achieve anything which may have attempted. What are the purpose of these standards? IIA is very clear. It has given 4 of these objectives because it guides adherence to the mandatory element of these standards, because all the mandatory elements would encompass and is helping me by the standards. It also provides me a framework for performing and promoting a broad range of value-added services, and also helps to evaluate my performance. Ultimately, I should know how I have achieved my activity, and that basis is provided by the standards. And also, as again mentioned, foster improved organizational processes and operations. So we have 2 kind of standards: the standards and the performance standards. They're denoted by a 1000 series and a 2000 series. Attribute standards, they are 5 in number, very critical. Purpose, authority, and responsibility. The purpose and authority and responsibility of the internal audit activity must be formally defined in the sorry, I think there is a band. Just give me a second, I'll open the door. Yes, sorry. Everything has to be defined in my internal audit charter, consistent with the mission of internal audit and the mandatory elements of IPPF, which is, as I mentioned, core principles, code of ethics, standards, and the definition. The internal audit charter establishes the internal audit activities positioned within the organization, including the nature of the CAE's functioning reporting relationship with the board, also authorizing access to records, personal and physical properties relevant to the performance of my engagement, and also define the scope of the activities. Again, the nature of both assurance as well as the consulting services must be defined in the charter. Going forward, 1100, independence and objectivity. Independence and activity covers these following elements: organizational independence, basically to achieve the degree of independence necessary to effectively carry out the responsibilities. We must have direct and unrestricted access to senior management of the board. The internal audit should have a dual reporting relationship, functionally to the audit committee and the board, and administratively the CEO or the MD. That is very critical. This dual relationship is the key to having an independence. Similarly, my roles have to be defined and my independence have to be so well articulated. It should not be actually in letter as well as in spirit. There should be no interference in determining the scope of internal auditing, the performance of work, communicating results. Also, I must be impartial, unbiased, and my attitude should be very clear to avoid any conflict. Basically, individual objectivity. That is also very important. I should not carry any baggage when I prepare my report because of an earlier incident in my career in the company, or my earlier avatar as some other process owner, relationships, etc. So my objectivity cannot be impaired. 1130 talks of impairment to independence or objectivity. Similarly, where impairment to organization independence and individual objectivity may include, but cannot be limited to any personal conflict of any interest, any scope limitation, any restrictions to the access of records, again, properties and resources, and also to funding. In these days, we have a lot of requirement where budgets have been cut both for internal audit and for so many other activities. How do we manage an effective internal audit? is an art which we have to learn as we go along and try to make the best of the resources. Because objectivity, my friends, is presumed to be impaired if an internal auditor provides assurance or consulting services of an activity for which the internal auditor had responsibility with the previous years. Similarly, if my potential impairment to my independence or objectivity is to any consulting or to assurance assignment, I must make a disclosure to it so that everybody is aware that this was the facts, and how I have actually worked around that can be also very well articulated. It is the key responsibility of this chief audit executive to ensure that everything is explained to the audit committee and all the stakeholders. Sorry. Proficiency and due professional care. 2110. Basically, proficiency is a collective term. One second. That refers to the knowledge, skill, and other competencies required for my internal audit function. It encompasses consideration of current activities, trends, and emerging issues to enable relevant advice and recommendation. This is critical, as I understand, and we must have sufficient knowledge to evaluate the risk of fraud and the manner in which it is managed in the organization, because that is so important. Also, we must have sufficient knowledge of the key information technology risks and controls, and available technology-based audit techniques to perform their assigned work. So today, in terms of cyber risks and the risk because of the technology which is being deployed can create havoc in the organization. I must be fully aware of those risks and also have sufficient knowledge so I can provide my audit program and dovetail that to have a control on all those areas where I can get exposed. Moreover, the use of robotic process automation, data analytics, etc. is the flavor of the season. I must know how to deploy them effectively and efficiently. Moving on, due professional care. 1220. This can be achieved by extent of work needed to achieve the organized engagement's objective. I have to consider the relative complexity, materiality, or significance of matters to which my assurance procedures have been applied. Also, it should be adequate and effective governance, risk and management and control processes. It should, depending on the nature of the organization, those should be adequate, so that the probability of significant errors, frauds, or non-compliance are minimized. But most important, the cost of assurance has to be in relation to the potential benefit. I cannot ignore that as well. In exercising this due professional care, again, we must be knowing how to use the technology and other data analytic tools. Moving forward, continuing professional development. In spite of a career spanning decades of internal audit, I am back to school, and so is everyone else. We as internal auditors must enhance our knowledge, our skills, and other competencies through continuing professional development. In fact, the challenge exam brought to us by IIA India is such a wonderful opportunity, and those who haven't enrolled, I seriously urge my friends to do that, all my chartered accountants friends, so that we are able to immediately get a CII degree without having to go through a longer, more arduous process of three level exams. And not only a degree will be added to me, but also it'll give me a lot of confidence in carrying out my internal audit assignments more effectively. This is quality assurance and this is a quality assurance improvement program. This is something which is, most organizations in a very formal manner, but it is actually very critical because it gives me the mirror. And it should both have the internal assessments as well as external assessments. Internal assessments basically cover, as per the standards 1311, ongoing monitoring of the performance of the internal audit activity, and also periodic self-assessment or assessments by other persons within the organization with sufficient knowledge of internal audit practices. Ongoing monitoring is an integral part of a day-to-day supervision, review, and measurement of my activity, as is incorporating into the routine policy and practices used to manage my activity. It uses processes, tools, and information considered necessary to evaluate conformance with the standards as well as the code of ethics. External assessments. This is also becoming very popular now. These assessments must be conducted at least once in every 5 years by a qualified independent assessor or assessment team from outside the organization. These assessments must be accompanied through a full external assessment, or it can also be a self-assessment with independent external validation. Both options are possible depending on the costs and the resources available. The external assessor must conclude as to the conformance with the Code of Ethics and Standards, and the assessment must also include operational or strategic comments which may be relevant. 1320, reporting on the quality assurance and improvement program. The CAE must communicate the results of the quality assurance and improvement program to the senior management and the board. These disclosures should include: 1, the scope and frequency of both the internal as well as the external assessment; 2, the qualifications and independence of the assessor or assessment team, including potential conflict of interest; 3, conclusions of the assessor; and of course, most important, corrective action plans. The form, content, and frequency of communicating the results of the quality assurance and the improvement program is established through a discussion with the senior management and the board, and considers the responsibility of the internal auditor and the CAE as is contained in the charter. Everything should be mentioned in the charter. The results of ongoing monitoring should also normally be communicated at least once a year. Sometimes we use these words: confirms with the international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing. Indicating these words that the internal audit activity conforms with the international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing is appropriate only if supported by the results of the quality assurance and improvement program, if that has been successful for me. And if talks about the disclosure non-conformance, and when non-conformance of the code of ethics or the standards impacts the overall scope or operation of the internal audit activity, the CAE must disclose the non-conformance and impact also to the senior management and the board. This is very important as far as my quality assurance and improvement is concerned. These were the performance standards, my friend. Now we just go to the the attribute standards. The performance standards are also 7 in number. The first is very critical: managing the internal audit activity. They provide, these performance standards in general provide the nature of internal audit activities and also the criteria against which the performance of the service can be evaluated. They not only apply to my internal audit services, but to the individual internal auditor as well. So individually, as I, internal auditor, as well as my internal audit team, the entire ecosystem, both are evaluated and the criteria are relevant for both. The first and the most critical is the managing the internal audit activity, 2000. My internal audit activity can be managed effectively when, number 1, it achieves the purpose and responsibility included in the internal audit charter. That is my Bible. 2, it conforms to the standard. 3, its individual members also conform to the Code of Ethics and Standards. And 4, it considers trends and emerging issues that could impact the organization. So what is happening in the organization, my knowledge of their business is so critical, how the ecosystem of that business is evolving. Everything is fast moving. We are in a VUCA world. We have to run together as internal auditors with the management, and without that our work cannot be So one thing is to develop an understanding of the organization and move with the trend. This standard is again broken up into some advisory. First is the planning, which helps me to develop a risk-based plan. The CAE must consult with senior management and the board and obtain an understanding of the organization strategies, the key business objectives, the associated risks, and the risk management processes. The CAE must also review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes in the organization's business risks, operations, programs, communication, and controls. These all have to be communicated and approved. I've seen many places, in practical sense, where the plan is there and it has been informally, agreed to, but there is no formal approval by the audit committee or the board by a resolution. Till that time, it doesn't become formal. The resource management. This is also so important today because the resources are scarce, people leave the organization, difficult to replace, and my budgets are also very tight. The CE must ensure that the resources are appropriate, sufficient, and effective. Appropriate means refers to the mix of knowledge, skill, and other competencies needed to perform the plan. I have to be a very good leader. My team has to be with me all the time so that they understand and we are sync and able to run together. Also, they have to be sufficient, and it refers to the quantity of resources needed to accomplish the plan. This is always a constraint today, my friends, but we'll have to manage one way or the other. Similarly, the resources are effectively deployed when they are used in a way that optimizes the achievement of the approved plan. So here my thinking cap is required so that I am able to see which is the right fit, which person in my team can be able to match the best assignment, and so on and so forth. Coming to 2040 policies and procedures. This is basically the form and content of the policies and procedures which are dependent upon the size and structure of the internal audit activity and the complexity of work. Similarly, I have to give a lot of emphasis to coordination and reliance, 2050. Here, the CAE has to share information, coordinate activities, and consider relying upon the work of other internal and external assurance and consulting services to ensure proper coverage and minimum duplication of effort. The CAE should also consider the competencies, objectivity, and the due professional care of these assurance and consulting service providers. And also, they must understand each other very well so that there is no blind spot as well as duplicity. Ultimately, there has to be a clear communication to the senior management and the board, and that has to be done periodically on the internal audit activities purpose, as well as authority, responsibility, and performance relative to the plan and to the conformance with the code of ethics and the standards. Reporting must include significant risks and control issues, also any fraud risks, any governance issues which I found, and other matters that require the attention of the senior management of the board. Everything important should be disclosed and nothing of importance should be hidden. The frequency and content of the reporting are determined collaboratively. They have to be done together with the CAE, the senior management of the board. And it will also depend on the importance of the information to be communicated, my friends. And the urgency, sometimes it becomes very urgent to report certain matter of any fraud or any major non-compliance, etc. So that has to be more, proactively done rather than wait for the cycle of the reports, etc. Lastly, the external service provider and the organization responsibility for the internal audit. This responsibility is demonstrated through the quality assurance and improvement program, which assesses my conformance with the code of ethics and the standards. The next performance standard, my friend, is the nature of work. This is the GRC, the critical part of any internal audit activity. Governance, here we understand as far as my standards are concerned, 2110. The internal audit activity must assess and make appropriate recommendations to improve the organizational governance processes. For one, making strategic and operational decisions. Two, overseeing risk management and control. And three, performing appropriate ethics and values within the organization. It also must ensure effective organizational performance management and accountability, and also help me communicate risk and control information to the appropriate areas of the organization. And lastly, it must help me coordinate the activities of and communicating information among the board, external and internal auditors, and other assurance providers and management, including, say, for example, the external auditors. My activity must also evaluate the design, implementation, and effectiveness of the organization's ethic-related objectives, programs, and activities. The tone at the top, the entity level controls, all will be covered by my review of the governance aspect. We must also assess whether the information technology governance of the organization supports my objectives and the organization strategies. As we go along, risk management 2120. This helps me determine whether risk management processes are effective and is a judgment resulting from the internal auditor's assessment that one, organization objective supports and align with the organization's mission, because those could be different, so that all my significant risks are identified and assessed, and also appropriate risk responses are selected that align risks with the organization risk appetite. All relevant risk information is captured and communicated in a timely manner across the organization, which helps enable the staff, the management, and also the board to carry out their responsibilities. As internal auditor, my activity must evaluate the risk exposures relating to the organization's governance, operations, and information systems, covering the achievement of the organization's strategic objectives, reliability and integrity of financial and operational information, and also effectiveness and efficiency of operational and programs. Of course, safeguarding of assets and compliance of laws and regulations, policies and procedures and contracts cannot be ignored. And lastly, control. The internal audit activity must evaluate the adequacy and effectiveness of the controls in responding to these risks within the organization's governance, operations, and information systems, and also help achieve the strategic objectives and the reliability and integrity of my financial and operational information. So both the operational as well as financial information has to be covered. And most important, effectiveness and efficiency of my operations and programs. And also, as I mentioned earlier, safeguarding of my assets and compliance with laws, regulations, policies, procedures, and the contracts. Coming to the next performance standard, the planning. Basically, it covers objective scopes, resource allocation, and work program. 2201. This planning must be developed and documented for each engagement, including my engagement's objectives, its scope, timing, and resource allocation. It all has to be put in a document. And it also must consider the organization's strategy, its objectives, and the risks relevant to the engagement. And it will change continuously as we go year to year, period to period. Planning considerations. Number one, the strategies and objectives of the activities being reviewed, the significant risks, and the adequacy and effectiveness all must be captured. Similarly, 2210, the engagement objectives. Objectives must be established for each engagement. Basically, adequate criteria are needed to evaluate the governance, risk, management, and control. And the internal auditor must ascertain the extent to which the management and or the board has established adequate criteria to determine whether objectives and goals have been accomplished. There are three types of criteria, my friend. Number one, internal. My SOPs, my delegation of authority, the policy, procedures, the legal framework, the laws, and the regulations imposed by statutory body. And of course, the third and also very critical, leading practices guidance. All that has to be evolved and made a part of my criteria. So knowledge of the business and knowledge of the work environment is very important. This engagement scope of 2220 is also very important because it has to be sufficient to achieve my objectives, and also must include the consideration of relevant systems, records, personnel, and physical properties, including those under the control of third party. Engagement resource allocation and engagement work program. We have to develop a document, as already mentioned, how to achieve my engagement objectives, and that is only through a work program and when my resources are deployed efficiently. Coming to the next standard, my friend, performance engagement. We internal auditors must identify, analyze, evaluate, and document sufficient information to achieve the engagement's objectives. Unless that is done, my work is not complete. Firstly, I must identify the information. As internal auditors, I must identify sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful information to achieve my objective. Sufficient information is basically factual, adequate, and convincing, so that a prudent, informed person would reach the same conclusions as the auditor. What do you understand by reliable information? Reliable information is the best attainable information through the use of appropriate engagement techniques. And relevant information supports my engagement observations and recommendations and is also consistent with the objectives for the engagement. And lastly, useful information helps the organization meet its goal. So all criteria have to be established. Analysis and evaluation. So all these are different aspects of my performance engagement, but very important is engagement supervision. The extent of supervision required will depend on the proficiency and the experience of my internal auditor and the complexity of the engagement. As a CAE, I have an overall responsibility for the supervision, and whether the engagement has been performed by internal audit activity internally or externally, my responsibility cannot be obviated. And my supervision should be also documented, and an appropriate evidence of my supervision is retained. My results have to be appropriately communicated. The criteria for communication is all in focus. Sorry, my friend. It has to include my objective, scope, and results. And the final communication of my results must include applicable conclusions, as well as most important recommendations and/or action plans. Where appropriate, my opinion should be provided, and this opinion must take into account the expectations of all the senior management, board, and other stakeholders, and must be supported by sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful information, as the earlier mentioned. The internal auditor are encouraged to acknowledge satisfactory performance in engagement communications. Many times we are required also to give a positive assurance, my friends, that these are the areas we found no comments. This is also very useful for me and to the stakeholders, that I've carried out an exercise and I haven't found an observation. This is also very useful because sometimes I feel if I haven't found an observation, my work is not complete. No, my friends, if I've done a good job but the controls are working well, it is critical for me to bring out this fact so that the stakeholders are aware and they can sleep and rest easy. The quality of communication is very important because how I can communicate well. Most important part of the communication is I should be able to be a good listener. And my communication all should be one, it should be accurate. Number one, be accurate means free from errors and distortions and are faithful to the underlying fact. Two, it should be objective. That means fair, fair, impartial, and unbiased, and also the result of a fair-minded and a balanced assessment of all the relevant facts. Clear means easily understood and logical, avoiding unnecessary technical language, and providing all sufficient and relevant information. It also has to be concise. That means it is to the point, and again, avoid unnecessary elaboration, superfluous details, redundancy, and wordiness, and has to be constructive, which means helpful to the engagement client and the organization and lead to improvements wherever needed. It has to be complete, which means lacks nothing that is essential to the target audience and includes all significant and relevant information and observations to support the recommendations and conclusions. And lastly, it has to be timely, so that depending on the significance of the issue, allowing management to take appropriate corrective action in a timely and a proper manner. So these are all the performance standards, my friend, and these are somehow we understand them well, but more important, once we go and read them, we understand how well they have been drafted and how relevant they are in the actual performance of my activity. Part of the mandatory ecosystem is my code of ethics, and the purpose of the IIA Code of Ethics is to promote ethical culture in the profession of internal audit. They include basically two essential components. One is the principle that are relevant to the profession and practice of internal auditing. Basically, they are integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. With integrity, I can establish my trust and also then provide the basis for reliance on my judgment. Objective, we have already discussed. Confidentiality. The internal auditor respects the value and ownership of information they receive and do not disclose information without appropriate authority unless there is a legal or professional obligation. And competency, my friends, we have to apply the knowledge, skill, and experience needed in the performance and required for that assignment. Similarly, the Code of Ethics also provides rules of conduct, and the conduct interpret the principles and describe behavioral norms expected of the internal auditor. Here again, we have to look at the integrity, my honesty, my diligence and responsibility, and also my observance of the law and making disclosures expected by the law and the profession. I should not knowingly be part of any illegal activity or engage in acts that are discreditable to the profession of internal auditing or to the organization. Now, as per the Companies Act 2013, as well as the LODR requirements, the very onerous responsibility has been given to internal auditors. And unless my rules of conduct and my code of ethics are followed both letter and spirit, things can become really nasty, my friend. Objectivity, confidentiality, and competence, all this is also very relevant as far as my rules of conduct are concerned. Here again, I have, my friends, it's something not only in words, but in spirit. I must reflect, see in the mirror, what I'm doing, is it fair, and is it something which will stand the test of time? And without that, it will be very difficult to be able to manage it with not only in the organization where I am carrying out the internal audit, but to my conscience as well. So these are broadly, when I come to my first slide, my friends, I'll just quickly recap. We have covered the core principles, 10 core principles. Definition, we've already understood. It's there, it's very comprehensive. As many times we read it, as many times we enjoy reading it. Standards, the attributes, and the performance standards, and the code of ethics. There is implementation guidance. I have taken some of the part of my series today from the implementation guidance as well. So we have also covered fairly in effect those as well. And supplementary guidance is also varied. It keeps evolving over time, and something I encourage to go to the IIA website. And if you IIA members, you have access to all this seamlessly. And every day there is a new blog, there is a new insight, a new article from all across the world as to how these standards are useful, how they make the sea change in actually carrying out the internal audit. Moving on to some of the other aspects, I must also mention about the internal audit standards of the ICAI. Recently, in the last 2 years, we have had new standards. There were some earlier standards, but all of them are undergoing revision, and we have had standards on series, standards on key concepts. SI 110, which talks of nature of assurance, and SI 120, which is on internal control. And we have the 200 series, which are standards of internal audit management, which include these 4 standards: managing the internal audit function, conducting overall internal audit planning, objectives of the internal audit, and choosing the work of an expert. So I encourage my friends to go through these, because they also are a summary of what we already discussed, and also gives a very simple and a basic flowing language of what is expected of these standards and compliance. These are, of course, my friends, recommendatory in nature, but it's good to inculcate them in our DNA as far as our internal audit activities are concerned. And then, of course, we have the conduct of internal audit assignments, which is SI 300 to 400 series, talking about the planning, the evidence, documentation, review and supervision of the audit assignments, which is the quality assurance from the other side. Of course, the communication and reporting of results, and monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues as well. The earlier standards which are not being revised are also under revision and may happen in the next year or so. Basically, what I'm looking for in the internal audit report, or ultimately, where is it my internal audit benchmark should be? So what are the key quality parameters? Significance. Basically, all these, everything I do has to have some significance. How important is the matter that was examined in the audit? This in turn can be assessed by several dimensions, such as the size of the auditee and the effect and the performance of the auditee on the unit, entity, or organization at large. Reliability. Are the audit findings and conclusions an accurate reflection of audit conditions with respect to the matters being examined? Are all my assertions in the written audit report or other audit communication fully supported by the data gathered by the audit? That questions I have to ask to pass the test of a key quality parameter. Objectivity. The question I have to ask here is, was the audit carried out in an impartial and a fair manner without favor, bias, or prejudice? And the auditor should base his assessment and opinion only on facts, sound analysis, and judgment. No prior prejudices. The scope. Did the audit program properly address all elements needed for a successful audit as per the scope and objective? And also, did the execution of the audit satisfactorily complete all the needed elements of the task plan or work program? Comprehensive as well as adequate. Timeliness. Were the audit results delivered at the appropriate time, my friends? This involves meeting timelines or delivering audit results when they are needed for a policy decision, or where they will be most useful in correcting management weakness, alerts, etc. Clarity. Was the audit report clear and concise in presenting the results of the audit? This would typically involve being sure that the scope, findings, and cause and the consequences can be readily understood by busy executives who may not be experts in the matter and are addressed but may need to act and respond to the reports. Efficiency. The question I have to ask my friends is, were the resources assigned to the audit responsible in the light of importance and complexity of the audit? Were they a fit to the audit assignment? And lastly, effectiveness. Did the findings and conclusions get an appropriate response from the auditee? Ultimately, they have to help improve the organization. I'm also going to touch upon what is the difference between components of an assurance assignment and consulting assignments. Both are embedded. So there was, in my mind, confusion that whether internal audit is part of assurance or is purely advisory or consulting. Actually, it is both. And depending on the nature and the scope of the assignment, some element of assurance will have predominance, and in other cases, consulting will have predominance. As far as insurance is concerned, it has three components involving a three-party relationship of the internal auditor, the auditee, and the insurance user, and elements of subject matter, a predefined criteria, and a conclusive outcome. All this is important, and ultimately it should result in a report which is written with an opinion on a standard format. Consulting advisories, as we understand, could cover operational, technical, strategic reviews, due diligence, and other such assignments where no formal opinion is conveyed, unlike an insurance assignment. So my friends, basically these are the standards. The IPP are very well articulated. They have been undergoing changes. The 2017 change was very significant and relevant and made more practical. But ultimately, what can make me an outstanding internal auditor? That is most important for me. I'm just going to my first slide so that it's relevant. Yes. Basically, what I understand in my career is that, like outstanding lawyers, teachers, artists, and doctors, internal auditors are made, not born. And mastering the skills is a long and an arduous process. And I feel it is one that true professionals dedicate themselves to at every step in their careers. No one stumbles into greatness. I also firmly believe that becoming an outstanding internal auditor involves not just what you know, like the IPPF or the standards, and a great understanding of risks, controls, and governance, but also how to get things done, the relationship acumen. We witnessed two internal auditors perform similar actions, my friend, but with very different outcomes. I suspect the reason is that the less effective internal auditor is strong in one trait and deficient in the other. There are two traits. One is my knowledge and one is my relationship acumen. We have mostly concentrated extensively on learning the technical skills of our profession, how to develop an internal audit plan for every engagement, document the results of the audit, craft a well-written audit report, etc., follow the standards to the T. Let us say, for example, we write an audit report in which we identify deficiencies and offer recommendations for remedial action. Recommendations on which you believe the readers should take swift action. The auditees are much more likely to do so with greater commitment if they trust you and believe that you know what you're talking about and consider the work you do to be sound, fair, and objective, as opposed to doing only corporate perfunctory exercises mandated by the audit committee or by a statutory requirement. Becoming an outstanding internal auditor takes years of experience, my friend, ongoing training, of course, and an awareness of the emerging trends in the profession of the environment. And of course, most of all, it takes passion. Ultimately, what are the results I'm looking at? What constitutes result? We as internal auditors are often required to deliver difficult, uncomfortable messages. There is no avoiding that, my friend. But blending honesty with empathy enables us to deliver these messages with sensitivity to the other person's concerns and priorities. The key questions I have to ask myself is: 1, what happens after the report is delivered? 2, did the audit have an impact? 3, did it create productive and beneficial change in the organization? 4, did it identify opportunities for improvement? Because we have to care more about the outcomes than the output. Output actually is restricted to the number of reports I generate. Outcome is the beneficial results it will generate. These outcomes are more meaningful than the length of the report itself or the number of findings and recommendations. My emphasis has to be quality over quantity. And my mission is not truly complete until management acknowledges my recommendations, implements them, and the recommendations are made productive, positive outcome. Being result focused means recognizing that my audit doesn't exist only to point out problems. Management often actually knows about these problems. More important, it provides solutions. In my life, my friend, my experience is there cannot be a problem without a solution. And anybody who has a problem without a solution is not thinking completely. Because my end result, again, I repeat, is not the report, but making things better for the company. Because as an internal auditor, if I'm delivering insignificant findings or conclusions, I will have an uphill battle to gain the trust of the client and others in the organization. Ultimately, what am I looking at in my reports? Sometimes I get this response from the auditee that I agree with your recommendations, but I disagree with all the findings. In other words, the client didn't take exception to the fact that I have found issues which have to be addressed. He was ready to fix the problem, but what he resisted was the tone of my report. My critical nature caused him to push back hard. That is my valuable lesson, my friends. If our tone is one of pointing fingers or speaking down, we will dig ourselves into a deep hole that we will be hard to climb out of, especially the next time we interact with the person. Because we must strive to maintain open, civil, and productive communication at all times. Basically, the words that I have to eliminate from my report includes failed, inadequate, ineffective, we found, it appears. Not necessarily that these are wrong words, but I believe they are ineffective because they assign blame, they are imprecise, and could be construed as a personal attack or a position the internal auditor inappropriately. That all have to be avoided, my friends. Another very important aspect is the need to develop professional skepticism. This is also very important essential element of the internal audit package of skill and ingredients that must be continually developed and listened to. Skepticism is a healthy dose of doubt coupled with curiosity, which could lead to uncovering areas of risk exposed or fraud. We as internal auditors are often susceptible to being misled by information that is sensational, popular, and entertaining. Effective professional skepticism requires a combination of interpersonal as well as technical skills. Interpersonal skills support the ability to read and communicate effectively with others, and also to ask probing questions that will uncover pertinent facts. And technical skills, of course, involve audit-specific expertise, industry knowledge, objectivity, and reasoning that enables analysis of these facts. A fatal flaw I see in auditors is the inability to understand that their personal opinion doesn't matter. Having an actual objective mindset is very, very crucial. Similarly, I have to develop not only my IQ and EQ, which we all understand, the intelligent quotient as well as the emotional quotient, but the intellectual curiosity quotient. Because if we neglect to ask the whys as many times as it takes to get to the root cause, or there is a deficiency in skills or expertise in certain areas, a key risk may be missed or ignored. Because I believe crafting the recommendation in an audit report will be one of the most challenging aspects of the job. And how to figure out the actual root cause and relate my recommendation to it is the key to a successful internal audit carried out. Similarly, I have to be very careful about an issue like intellectual arrogance. I already know the answer. And similarly, also intellectual laziness. That is good enough is good enough. No, I'll have to continuously strive to improve. Every report has to be a better report than what I have brought out from the last time. Final words. Listening to me is just the beginning, my friends. It must be supported by a continual, focused effort to convert words to action. Complacency is the enemy of success, my friends, and never assume you have arrived. Keep working at it, and when success arrives, embrace it, but continue to look for ways to improve, develop, and evolve. Take a long, close look in the mirror, my friends, and ask yourself if you are functioning at your highest level. It is a journey you won't regret. My friends, it's a magic if you decide to say that I will improve 1% every day in my life. And believe you me, after 365 days, the improvement is not 3.6 times, but 35 times. 1% everyday improvement will result in a 35 times improvement over a period of 1 year. That is the power of compounding. That is the power of improvement, my friends. Because I can admit for and agree for all of you that we are at our best and we are happiest when we are fully engaged in work we enjoy on the journey towards a goal we have established for ourselves. It gives meaning to our time off and comfort to our sleep, and it makes everything else in life so wonderful, so worthwhile. So my friends, basically, knowing the standards is critical, but only well begun is half done. More than that, you have to strive for excellence every day of your life. I think my presentation is complete. I can go back to my august friends and colleagues and also open up Q&A, which can be taken up as and when questions are coming to the question board. Thank you very much, my friends, for your patience hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sumant Chadha, for the insight into the basic framework of internal audit, subjective, how to go about it, what the organization is looking for from the internal auditors report, how do we should report, and in a very lucid manner. Now the house is open for question answer. If any of the participants have any question, they can write their question. I forward it to Mr. Chadha. He will respond to it.
Vikash, if you allow me, as
Yes, please.
you take the questions, Mr. Sumant, there are a lot of appreciation going on across the country because I was just taking a look at the WhatsApp group, professional groups, and there is a lot of appreciation of the session going on. Congratulations. And definitely the point you made in terms of what is important for being an internal auditor is very relevant, I believe, in today's term. You touched upon with areas which is very close to my heart too, especially professional skepticism, use of word, not using any personal opinion, not to be negative in report, use negative reports. These are very practical and especially relationship management. I really appreciate the session.
Thank you.
It's a mix of theory along with your practical inputs. Thanks a lot.
You see, theory is a little mundane and mandatory. You know, it kind of, it's kind of, you can read the standards and read you must, because they have to become part of your DNA. Reading them once and doing take 1000, 2000 series, etc., actually has no meaning. Slowly they must reflect in your DNA, so that automatically when you perform your internal audit activity, or they should provide a background and the basic tenet of how you carry out the audit. That is the usefulness of standards, because otherwise ticking the box that my audit charter is there, my program is approved by audit committee, my communication is well, it's fine. That is all aspects which are relevant, but ultimately they have to come and become part of my DNA as internal audit. then I can operate at my highest level without making extra effort.
Yeah, absolutely aligned to your thought. Rather, you touched upon on CIA challenge exam. I would like to share my experience. I touched upon the course, and maybe what I see many professionals, they feel that I am not an internal auditor. What's the use of this course to me? But what I have seen in the course today, internal audit is assisting in business, any business, achieving its objectives. So I don't see much difference between an internal auditor's role to that of the promoters of the business or the business stakeholders. Because what promoters or management of the business is doing today, they are carrying out risk management. And what is their vision? Their vision is achieving the objectives of the business. So if we look at our internal auditors course contribution is totally aligned with that. And what I saw in the IIA course, rather certified internal auditors course, it give you an approach. Mr. Sumant Chadha just said about having it in the DNA. So it's very contextual, meaningful, and practical approach, I would say, which will tell you what to do. And it is around risk and control. So if you are running a business yourself, there are risks which comes from uncertainty, and against that it is controls. So internal auditors are dealing with risks and controls in day out, assisting the organization to achieve their objectives. So this course, I believe, is a very pertinent one to all who are involved with the business. And Mr. Chadha really made a point that if you can try and get an opportunity to get a certification in one sitting, it's definitely much more easier and meaningful than going for 3 levels of exam in our busy schedule. Very point taken, and I believe that point should be noted by all our members. Thank you, Mr. Chadha.
Just to add, we have been trying for the approval of IIA India, IIA Global to allow us in India the challenge exam, and the whole exercise started 4 to 5 years ago. And when Richard Chambers was here, the earlier president, and we were very keen for that. And only this year it has, last year it has become actually possible.
One question, I could not see the name of the asker. How robotic, ML and artificial intelligence, etc. affected day-to-day internal audit?
This is a question I ask myself every day. To be honest, I haven't, in my internal audit, I have used data analytics, but I understand what continuous monitoring is, what RPA is, but I haven't, deployed in my internal audit as yet. But we are in the process of doing so. But I think the right person and the most qualified person is Arijit Dada on this call. He can answer that most effectively because his first-hand experience.
Just to supplement what Mr. Sumant said, I would say today internal audit resource is also scarce, as just like any resource for the business is scarce, so internal audit resource is also scarce, and you need to utilize it in a proper way. Now, with automation, with RPA, with use of artificial intelligence, the regular work, the groundwork that internal auditors used to do, that can easily be carried out by RPA, robotic process automation, and AI, artificial intelligence. How it is useful? Because just imagine when you are carrying out an internal audit, think of you are doing an audit in a bank where you have a core banking software, the front end software, multiple systems. And if you are working over there with your manual efforts, just imagine so much data you are handling. RPA helps in extracting the data in a very efficient way. So it integrates all these multiple systems, extracts the data, bring it on a single, I would say, platter for analytical tools to take over. So that's where RPA really helps. Another big, I would say, something repetitive. Even say, just imagine we are handling so much information in PDF forms. RPA can be used to extract that data and convert it into a auditable sample. So RPA today helps our internal auditor to do a population audit rather than doing a sample audit. So that's the biggest boon of RPA, I would say. Now, recently I wrote a write-up also in related matters. Now, my point is, many people have a feeling, what will be the internal auditor's role with RPA and AI, with automation coming in full-fledged? Internal auditor's role will continue, because just now Sumanji talked about analytics. Now, think of use of analytics into audit. You are in a particular type of industry to carry out audit. Who will tell the system the whether it is AI or it is machine language? You have to guide the system on the scenarios, and that is where the human need to play a role more and more. They should teach initially these systems how to carry out audit with their experience, with their knowledge, and with their I would say uh, acumen or aptitude. So it is today's world. If to whoever is asking, it is not man versus machine. It is man plus machine in internal audit that can really make the difference. And internal auditors, instead of doing regular mundane job, can leave it onto robotic process automation and artificial intelligence, and they can focus on something which is requires more mental, more human, something which is out of the box. And you might have seen in the definition, Sumanji also touched upon insight. Insight is a core area which is more expected from the internal auditors today, rather than coming out with hordes of observations and not finding the root cause, not in a position to suggest recommendations to take care of those. That's my answer, I believe. Mr. Sumanji, did I make sense?
No, you made perfect sense. The only caveat is, it's very difficult for an internal auditor who has not been exposed to RPA or, immediately start doing something like that. So one, you have to have some technical qualification. You have to have an area where you have worked and slowly. So the best is start by starting. So get into this. First, you must know that this is something I need to do. Secondly, it's take it step by step. Uh, get exposed to read about it. Then do some course, and also maybe joint hands with a B, a certified, or some CISA certified who has had some exposure. Work jointly with them so that you are able to on the job understand what is happening, how bots are created. One is understanding what to do. You will have to guide that some technical person how to create bot. If I'm checking accounts payable, what are the key parameters I have to check? What are the risks which can get undetected? All those false positives have to be all determined. So that is where the human element is going to be, because what I have to check through artificial intelligence is my input, because otherwise garbage in, garbage out, my desired results will not be there. A simple Excel analysis would probably give me more results, maybe take more time, but I'm not going to get away with that. I'll have to learn through the process so that I'm able to use my skills more than on an Excel side, through a robotic side. Ultimately, the program is written by, it could be written by somebody technical, but the entire input, the process, the entire ecosystem is handled as an internal audit, so that the desired results come effectively and efficiently.
Another
Just
question.
one point to make before, sorry, because just to supplement, and the beauty of the RPA is, even people who are not technical like us, they can pick up, because it's like a drag and drop. The RPA systems which are available in the market, like Automation Anywhere or Blue Prism, their beauty is you can use drag and drop. So you don't need to be so much computer, I would say, specialist in that case. So that's how RPE is picking up so much today. Thank you, Vikash and Sumanji.
Chadha sir, there is two questions which are similar. I'm clubbing both of them. Do you see ICA standard and IIA, any alignment of ICA standard and IIA standard? Another question is how IIA sync with ICA standard?
So answer is very simple. The endeavor is to sync, and ultimately IIA are the global standards. And of course, institute is, has brought out the standard, and they have very well been drafted. They're very simple to understand, so they are not in conflict with each other. The concepts will remain the same, whether they have two parallel standards. IPPF has a different way of approaching, the whole ecosystem of what is mandatory, the code of ethics, the mission statement, the advisories and core principles. They are on a broader platform. The ICA standards will get into work paper, managing the results of audit for the previous audit, etc. So I can supplement them in my internal audit activity, and at some point of time they may converge. I don't know when and how, but nevertheless, both are useful and will have their place in the sun at the moment.
How to prepare for IPPF standard for CIA exams?
That is my question. I have enrolled and I haven't started studying. I have enrolled in the exams for November, and I think preparing, and I must thank from the bottom of my heart Naveen ji and Arijit ji, so that I got into detailed reading. I've been reading them for so many years, but perfunctory way. Is bari to I had to get into each and every comma and full stop. So I have started studying. Start by starting. There are course materials, 1,000 question available. Do those 1,000 questions sincerely and you'll pass. I mean, idea is to spend 2 hours a day. As a working person, it is difficult. And at my age, to start studying, I thought giving CA exam and studying in when I was 22, and I will never have to give an exam again. Now again, I have to start studying, and thank you to both of you to giving me the opportunity that I started my exam preparation. So maybe I can ask, after a few months, the same question to my friends.
The question is, where does you see the profession growing from here? How is the profession evolving?
We are growing like outer space. We are going to cover the entire world. Hum chha gaye hain, as internal auditor had no place of its prominence, only statutory audit, insurance, and they had a lot of clout and a chip on their shoulder. But today, believe you me, internal auditor is respected far more than what it was earlier, especially in India. I don't know so much abroad, but because of the mandatory requirement and the responsibilities, audit committees give specific days that we will not discuss the quarterly accounts. You come and explain point to point. They have become very serious in understanding, getting into the understanding of what is actually happening in the organization. They feel we can provide the eyes and ears, and also the torchlight for better performance, give them a comfort so that they can sleep at night, and all the risks are broadly covered, and all the controls which are there to mitigate the risks are not only framed, but they are also operating effectively. So more and more, in terms of when the compliance and the requirement of the stakeholders increase, the business complexity increase, the way the startups are scaling up from 20 employees to 20,000 employees, in a matter of 5 years, all the ecosystems have to work, and internal audit has increased in the last 5 years. But my friends, the enjoyment in terms of its glory has just begun. We can't hear you.
Identical description is repeated twice.
Sorry, can you?
Not clear why standard 2320 with identical description. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I don't have an answer to that. I saw it and I ignored it. Let it be. Maybe somebody will out. You can write to IIA and maybe
Another question,
help to modify it based on your request. That'll be nice.
another question is, please guide us on LODR and other requirements of internal audit, which you briefly touched upon.
LODR and other requirements, there are two basic things. One is the Companies Act that, a threshold of company 138B, you have to have internal audit, and that has to report to the board audit committee. And again, the scope has to be approved by the board or audit committee, as well as the reportings have to be independent and all that. So all the standards have to be applied. LRDR again said that there has to be risk framework. There has to be environment in which all the aspects of governance, risk and control are functioning, are appropriately present in the organization, and are also operating effectively. I don't know the clauses at the moment, but they are all practical and evolving. The onerous responsibility which is being cast on the chief audit executive to be independently responsible for this function is cannot be overemphasized, because the dual responsibility in terms of administratively and functionally reporting to the board or audit committee, and administratively reporting to the CEO or MD is very important, because for resource allocation, for the day-to-day activity, to access to the books, etc., you need the support of the process owners as well as the top management. But my independence and objectivity has to be when I'm able to report directly to the board or the audit committee. In fact, when internal auditors are presenting to the board, the audit committee may want to have, the independent directors may want to have a separate session. It is required by LODR. It is mandated actually to have a separate independent session where nobody from the management is there, so that you can have a one-to-one, tete-a-tete, free and a frank discussion. Similarly, statutory auditors have to have a separate discussion with the internal auditor. Is there any area which they are concerned with, which you can cover? And similarly, if the statutory auditors have found something which needs to be addressed by the internal auditor in the next quarter or the next sequel, is also very important. Idea is the organization, the tone of the top will decide everything. If the management wants to function in a very fair and a proper manner and to get the best results of the internal audit, they'll have to give a free hand to us, so that, and they realize that we are here to help them. Maybe a short-term sacrifice on certain reporting requirements or certain areas of concern, or old legacies which they may be carrying. But as they evolve, the internal auditor is going to be a trusted advisor to them, sitting on the boardroom with them, so that strategic decisions for further enhancement, policies, and the way the organization is going to survive in the future, we can play a very significant role. Once the management realizes that, the formalities of LRDR, etc., are all there, we can all tick in the box. But the tone of the management has to consider that we can provide a useful tool, not only a fault finding tool, but a tool where we can be very profoundly giving value add to the organization, which nobody else can do, because we have access to every process owner, every sub process, etc. So my knowledge is far superior to most of the people in the organization. Only thing is how they can extract the best out of me. Thanks.
Suppose an internal auditor staff has just been promoted from another department of the organization. Thereafter, that staff, along with a senior internal auditor staff, is assigned to do the internal audit of the previous department from which he is promoted. Does it conform to the standard?
So there is a very important advisory which talks of this in the standard. So generally, we should, as a process, try and avoid such situation. But if it is inevitable, then we'll have to wear a second hat and also report and make disclosures to the process owners that this is something I am reviewing and part of a team where I have been part of. That disclosure is important. How I can try and look at it from a fresh angle without getting prejudice to what I was doing that time is also very critical. It is best avoided, but if it is absolutely mandatory, there are certain simple steps given in the standard to follow it. It can be done also, but you have to be very careful in carrying out that activity in terms of disclosures, as well as giving that kind of limitation in your report.
What is the best approach for internal audit to stay aligned with the organization's strategy?
Approach is simple, my friend. You must know the business. You must understand what is the objectives, where the organization is going, what is the board actually thinking in terms of future operations, how they are actually scanning the horizon in terms of what are the risks which are going to affect them, whether the internal risks or external risk or regulatory risks, and how the board or the management is actually going to address those. Once my thoughts are aligned, I have discussions with them in detail as regards the scope of my audit. Now, the audits have to be risk-based. So not only I have to engage with the management to assess the top-level risks, but I have to go down to the processes and sub-risks. The RCMs have to be well articulated as well as kept up to date. And my priority of internal audit has to focus on all the key risks which may affect the organization as they go along in the journey of improving or maximizing stakeholders' value.
Sumanji, if you permit, I will just supplement my analogy.
Please.
Every organization have their vision. So where they want to reach, what they want to achieve, for what they aspire to exist for. Now, there are missions to support those visions. So missions are what they actually would be doing to achieve those visions. Now, these missions are a little bit long-term, which are broken into maybe 3 to 5 years into strategic objectives. These strategic objectives are sourced, it further percolate down to functional objectives. So what a finance will do, what a marketing will do, or a manufacturing will do to support those strategic objectives. And in an organization, those who are accustomed to it, you will know there are concepts of key risks indicators. So what are those risks which may hinder in achieving those strategic objectives? Simultaneously, just imagine, individual, we are all accustomed with key performance indicators related to our role. So when you are asking how internal audit plans to perform as per the strategy, organization strategic objectives, and we speak about risk-based planning, risk-based internal audit, it is, to my understanding, linking these key risk indicators with the key performance indicators. There is a fantastic document by Institute of Internal Auditors. I believe it's a free document. Go through it. That will definitely bring a lot of thoughts in terms of aligning the objectives with your internal audit plan. Thank you. Just thought to add.
Very well articulated. I haven't read this article. I will definitely go through it. Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you.
The last question is, would you suggest any format for internal quality assurance and improvement program? Any criterias?
So this is a very well laid out process by IIA, the quality assessment. First, the periodicity, the scope, the adequacy of coverage. There's a very detailed assessment given, and point to point, they have to cover all the aspects, 360-degree review, how the whole approach is there, what are the documentation they have to take, who all people they have to interview, the Q&A requirement, and ultimately how they will ultimately reach the conclusion that they are conforming to the standards or they're not conforming to the standards, or any improvement is required in terms of the aspects of whether all the key elements of IPPF, the way the audit planning is done, the documentation of objectivity and independence has been, not only in letter but in spirit, how all the key risks have been there, how the risk assessment exercise was carried out before determining the scope, and what are the findings, are the findings relevant. When I talked about the 8 elements, all they have to be part of that. Those 8 elements are talking about, I have the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the way the internal audit reports have to be structured. It's a very comprehensive exercise, but very interesting. The formal assessment externally is mandated for 5 years, every 5 years, but every year you have to do a self-assessment or a hybrid assessment, and that is basically to see the mirror of where I am today.
Lot of tech-oriented companies are booming. How, as an internal auditor, I can equip myself with necessary skills in the evolving business area?
So tech, like any other business, requires a review of the controls, and the entire GRC model of these tech companies are radically different from other companies, I gather. And also what happens is that the biggest resource is their intellectual property, their people, the people who are actually managing the projects. Now today, most of these organizations have work from home environment, how that is being managed. Their projects are going all across the world. That also is a challenge in terms of the requirements of the mandates of these my customers. Similarly, how the documentation is stored, how my cyber security is taken care of, how are my project management hours being mapped and controlled, is there any weakness in any of these activities. So all the plethora of activities of internal audit will depend from organization to organization, whether they are providing services, software as a service, or they are selling hardware, or they are a combination of both, or they are only purely in the consulting nature. It depends on a hybrid situation, but the requirements of internal audit, the core principles will remain the same. More and more use of technology is required in such cases, because the complexity is different. Even the regulations are different, whether the data protection requirement, the GST requirement, the indirect taxes, the export services, all that is changing and evolving for these organizations fast and rapidly. So I have to be abreast with the laws. I must know exactly how the environment they operate, the different countries they are operating it, what are the conditions those countries have imposed. All that is very important for me. So my interaction with the process owners becomes very critical, and luckily they are all technical people. They understand importance of a process review because they are carrying out their reviews themselves, and it becomes a very interesting and a meaningful exercise to carry out the audit. RPA and machine learning can be a very important tool to carry out, so that the basic comfort of continuous monitoring is taken care of, and then I can provide value add when I able to identify the key risks, as well as provide and see what controls are there to have mitigate those risks.
If I can make a point, if you allow me, I believe Sumanji has made a point with his experience. I believe you passed out in 82, I believe, Vikash, you read out 1982, sir? 84. So today he is appearing for certified internal auditor course. So I believe whoever has question in whatever seniority, people today, whether you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, so just like that, a businessman, basic technology, anybody and everybody has to understand. Whether we are accountants, but we can't avoid basic technology. That doesn't mean that we have to be a specialist into technology, but we need to understand the basic technology. And Sumanji said that our profession is almost, it's spreading throughout the world. Probably it will go to the space also pretty soon. So it's a, I would say, paradigm shift. I believe when Sumanji started in 84 and I started in 92, things were totally different. It's a paradigm shift, and internal auditors have to keep moving with the time. And as you rightly said, in a tech company, things are absolutely different from a manufacturing company. basic technology will play a major role in terms of understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No more. I could not see any more question. So we are at the almost at the end of the today's VCM. So now I request Guwahati Audit Club Secretary Mr. Victor Shah to kindly propose formal word of thanks.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Vikas Bhaiya. Honorable President, IIA Calcutta Chapter, C. Arijit Roy sir. Respected C. Navinji Garg, President of Guwahati Audit Club. Our most valued delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all. It's a privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion, the first webinar of organized by the Guwahati Audit Club.
Victor, your
My
voice is
president-
not audible.
Hello. Yeah, am I not audible?
Better now.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just put the mic a little closer. My president at the very outset has apologized for organizing a professional discussion obsolete since the inception of the club. But I would like to add that no other day would have been better than today. As today is Guru Purnima, a day celebrated to pay gratitude to all our gurus who have from time to time freed us from ignorance. I, on behalf of Guwahati Audit Club of IIA Calcutta Chapter and the entire organizing team, would like to start with thanking our chapter president, Arijit Roy sir, for taking his time out and giving the audience an insight on the role and activity of IIA India. Arijit sir has rightly said, with introduction of RPA and AI, internal audit is more of a human thing to help and build the RPA process. It just sounds me like the ad of MG. It's an internet thing inside. My sincere thanks to the most important person of today, our speaker, CA Sumant Chadha ji sir, for enlightening us with his vast experience and knowledge. I must mention my deep sense of appreciation for Chadha sir for demonstrating an altogether new area of international professional practice framework, its attributes and performance standards. I extend my sincere thanks for giving an excellent coverage on performance standards, code of ethics, SIA issued by ICAI, and most importantly, professional skepticism. Sir, your slide on key quality parameters of internal audit report deserve special mention. Your words on having good knowledge of standards and international practice, maintaining a good maintaining relationship acumen to become a good internal auditor was really thought-provoking. Blending honesty with empathy while presenting a report will make the process more accurate, as you rightly said. So far, sir, I have heard of IQ and EQ, but today you mentioned of CQ, that is curiosity quotient, which is really interesting to ponder upon. We are all enriched and inspired by your presentation, sir. Also, bringing to us we thank you for bringing to us the opportunity and glory of an internal auditor. Last but not the least, I thank all the delegates who have joined from all the length and breadth of the country and abroad. Such is perhaps the aura of IIA, which makes such participation from all around the corner. Thank you all delegates for taking your time out and making this webinar a resounding success. It is obviously your presence which makes this webinar complete. Guwahati Audit Club of IIA Calcutta Chapter once again thanks all delegates for taking part in this webinar. I would fail in my duty if I don't acknowledge the logistic and infrastructural support given to us by Manaj all throughout. Finally, I'd like to end my words with an anonymous quote. Internal auditors are the eyes and the ears of the management. Be sure you are not deaf and blind. Unquote. With these words, I thank you all and wish you a good health always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Now we declare this program.
Yes.
बाकी सब चली गई शायद ना? We can close this meeting now.
Manaj, broadcast is closed.